Association of Police, Fire and Crime Panels raised a query as to whether members on complaints panels were covered by personal liability insurance, and it was confirmed that they were. Okay. Next item is the minutes of the panel meeting of the 16th of December. Should all got a copy of that. Can you tell me if you have any problems with it accuracy wise? Okay, Councillor Maxwell.
Well, it's not the accuracy. I can't see the page number actually. So looking at people, is it possible to have what age group were these people? Am I allowed to ask that question?
I think that was given because it says in there that it gave the various different things to do with the who was consulted, but I think that's probably more a substantive item, and maybe we could come on to that with consultation on the other, because it's a general thing, consultations.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, we had another consultation later on for the precept as well.
Excuse me, Chair, could I just ask a question then?
Yeah.
Given the fact that 1,103 people did it, and there are 506,000 people in the county, can I
It's still something that we're going to discuss later.
Thank you.
Maxwell. Yeah. Okay. Yes, sorry, Mrs. Shields.
On page 5, on agenda item 5, on present, it's quite funny. It says Mrs. Anita Shield, except for part of item 30.
Yes, I think it was because you had to leave, and you were left and came back, didn't you?
Okay.
Do you remember?
Fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
There was one other thing. It said on page 6, sort of near the bottom, that paragraph, not the last one, but the one. I think it might be better to just say on course to have 1,500 officers, because that, you know, is still more than we've ever had. So I think that's probably more exact. Any other queries or comments from anyone? Okay, in that case, can I have a proposer to accept the minutes? Councillor John Paul Carr, and the seconder, Councillor McGee, and all in favour? Okay. Yeah, all in favour. Subject to that amendment. Subject to that amendment, yeah. Okay. Yeah. The other item I had will come up later. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the proposed police precept, and obviously, you know, we've got quite a lot to cover today. So if I could just remind members that we are dealing with the precept today. So, you know, we try not to go off onto a tangent on other topics that we might need to bring up at another time. Okay, if I can hand over to Stephen Muld to introduce his precept.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So my precept proposal in front of you today reflects that, like many others, we're working in a period of serious uncertainty. The government has provided policing with an indicative 3-year settlement with an expected precept increase of £10 per year for the next 3 years. However, as set against this, we are all facing a rise in the cost of living, with inflation at December hitting 5.4%, an impact felt by every household. As we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, it's clear that the virus has cast a very long these to come. So it's against that backdrop this backdrop that we started to work on our budgets for the 22-23 and considered what the level of council tax precept should be. So based on the views of Northamptonshire residents, for a number of years, I prioritised local and national funding to increase police officers. I'm proud that during my time in office, the number of police officers has increased from 1,170 to 1,460. This is already the most the force has ever had. And with today's proposed precept rise, this will increase it further to over 1,500. This is an increase of 330 police officers, 28% in the county on the time since I came to office. Together with the beat buses, I recently introduced, the majority of investment has been made in neighbourhoods, also in increasing visibility on policing for local residents. However, I'm also always mindful of the impact council tax increases have on households. Therefore, I felt it very essential to gather views of residents to inform my precept considerations. Due to the timescales for the police, for both police and fire, and to enable me to receive and consider results before finalising my proposals, the consultation was launched on the 20th of December 21 and closed on the 17th of January 22. We would like it to be longer, but you have to bear in mind the time's going up. So I am very grateful to all of those who took time in the consultation. I'm very grateful to colleagues who worked on it, communicating it in many different ways to achieve as wide a response as possible. Also, I want to make a special thank you to panel members, parish councils and MPs who I know received the link many times and circulated it to all their contacts. The survey included both police and fire. Policing received over 1,400 responses, and I'm heartened by the support that over 50% of Northamptonshire residents were prepared to pay £10 or more if they were able to for police services. Furthermore, 42.9% thought Northamptonshire were doing a good or excellent job, and 27.6% saying they were doing a fair job. It's essential that the budgets are sufficient to sustain the 1,500 police officers. Council taxpayers are presented with a precept that doesn't place an unnecessary burden on already stretched household budgets. This is never an easy decision to take, but I believe the proposals in front of you today present the best deal for Northamptonshire. To £278.04, which is an increase of 3.7 or 19 pence per week. Whilst there still be a need for savings to be made over the medium term, the Chief Constable has embraced this challenge, and based on current assumptions with this precept, (3 years) for the first time. Furthermore, this will fund the capital programme, provide some investment in policing priorities, and enable adequate levels of reserves to meet unexpected or unforeseen circumstances. Since I was elected, I've worked hard to deliver a stable budget and robust financial plans for Northamptonshire Police. These are in place, and to enable me to make informed decisions and to invest in priorities to benefit the residents of Northamptonshire. So as such, in 22-23, I ring-fenced £1 million in revenue funding to target my priorities, which are protection that keeps the county safe, efficient and effective response, protect and support those who are vulnerable, effective justice, and of course, modern services that are fit for the future. The Chief Constable has submitted proposals to address this. I'll be reviewing those proposals, subject to agreeing the precept, made by him at the Accountability Board in February before final determination. In addition to this, Madam Chair and panel, Through the OPFCC commissioning delivery budget, I've worked on additional investment in early intervention and the youth team's work in 22-23. Furthermore, I've ring-fenced funding with the PFCC Initiatives Reserve, which will continue to support and embed the investment made in previous years to prioritise work to support victims and vulnerable individuals, which will include initiatives to reduce domestic violence and reoffending, increased investment to continue prioritise early intervention and engagement work, and more funding to prioritise targeted youth intervention and engagement work, which will increase capacity in neighbourhoods. As members will be aware, all the funding in policing is allocated to the PFC. Following an intense budget scrutiny and challenge process, I set the budget for the Chief Constable within the overall envelope available. Every year, I seek to maximise this allocation where I can. And for 22-23, this has increased to 93.5% of the total envelope. The balance is spent on capital finances, commissioning, delivery, and the cost of my office. As many of you know, I've always been open and transparent about the work the OPFCC undertakes to help you understand your role in holding me to account. The budget we manage is in two separate areas. We have the cost of managing my office, which includes all staff who manage and support me to deliver my statutory duties. I've always endeavoured to ensure that the cost of staffing this office is less than 1% of the total force budget for 22-23. But actually, it will be, we're well under that, approximately 0.06% of the total budget for 22-23, the same as 21-22. Separate to this, I've invested in and delivering a ranging of commissioning and delivery areas which directly provide services to Northamptonshire residents and working closely with other key partners. This work helps to protect and support some of the most vulnerable across the county, diverting people away from the criminal justice system and helping people live more profitable and fulfilling lives. From the current report, you will see that our county is penalised when it comes to the current funding formula. I believe it's fundamentally unfair that residents find themselves in a position where they pay more for their emergency services in comparison to other counties. Northamptonshire is one of the fastest growing counties in the country, well above the national average. However, a significant part of the current funding as 57% of our police funding is allocated on the basis of a funding formula that has not been updated for over 10 years. This state of affairs needs addressing because, of course, every year the formula is not updated, Northamptonshire continues to miss out. I'm pleased that work on the funding formula and the Minister has given a commitment that it will be implemented in this Parliament. And Madam Chairman, I make my commitment that I will continue to actively lobby for a fairer funding formula for Northamptonshire residents. For both police and fire precept proposals, the budgets also support the statutory duty I have to foster and develop collaborative work between our emergency services to help them more efficient and effective. In both reports today, you will see examples of my commitment to collaboration, including greater integration between police and fire and rescue to reinvest in frontline. I've seen this firsthand, the benefits of greater collaboration, and this work will continue at pace. Other challenges, such as the potential future cost of pensions, are being dealt with proactively at both a local and a national level to secure funding for both police and fire services. These uncertainties are set out within the report, and together with national colleagues, I will actively work to influence a sustainable and a fair way forward. Producing a budget precept and financial strategies each year requires teamwork and a huge amount of work. Most importantly, this teamwork includes finance colleagues in the unitary councils who work with Helen to provide forecast and information on very tight timescales. Helen and I are very appreciative of their hard work in which it ensures that the proposed precepts before you today are based on the accounts the agreed council tax information and not estimates. Furthermore, in policing, around 43% of the funding comes from council tax receipts. Collecting this funding on police's behalf is a big task, and I would like to extend my appreciation to both unitary councils for their hard work in securing such high collection rates. This precept proposal and the work behind it represents the outcome of a huge amount of work. I'd like to pay a special thanks to the joint finance team and everyone else in the force, partners and the OPFC who have worked together through work on the consultation and to deliver this year's budget to ensure we're in a robust, pragmatic and affordable This report sets out my precept proposal, I'm having some trouble saying that, too many P's, for the service, together with an overview of the budget, capital programme, the medium-term financial plan and the reserve, which have informed my proposal. I believe that the proposal to increase the 22-23 police precept by £10 per annum, which equates to 19 pence a week for policing purposes, represents the best deal for Northamptonshire, and I commend it to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. The first item we had is 6A, which is just the statutory duty we have. So unless you've got any questions on that, James will answer them. But before we move into our discussion, I need to call our first public speaker, Mrs. Shirley Jones. If you'd like to come over to that corner and speak. Everyone, sorry, James, it's time.
Yes, I'm timing.
Okay, thank you.
Could you use the microphone?
Yes, yeah.
Right, thanks. Well, I just want to say, as someone who's had to have contact with the police as a service user, I think it's a very stretched force, and in my case, as far as I'm concerned, that has led to the police not fulfilling their statutory duties. There was a matter where the police couldn't download CCTV within 6 months, and so the matter couldn't be taken any further. Even though the police had other evidence to go on, as far as I know, they didn't act upon that evidence. I would also say the very low budget set for the Police and Commissioner's Commissioner's own office, I think, frankly, at times it shows that it's a very low budget, and there are matters of you know, in terms of how correspondence is dealt with. It could be more professional. For example, referring to a possible perpetrator of a crime as a lady. I mean, I think in this day and age, and particularly a police force, I would expect more neutral language to be used, like men and women. And it's taken me to point this out. So I think even the way that crimes and complaints are logged could be better, better written. And there's also the fact of professional standards. I've had to take matters to professional standards. So it gums up the works, the inefficiency or the failures at one level always causes a backlog and a jam log, as I'm sure you know, that you have to go to a complaints department. There's also a backlog for that. It was over 8 weeks before I received an acknowledgement of a complaint from professional standards. The person in professional standards wouldn't converse with me. She wouldn't reply to an email. Even though I said I would like to speak to her, I didn't even get a response. And the Commissioner's office told me it was about reasonable and proportionate responses. For example, I would tell you if it was a complaint with the NHS, you would almost certainly speak to a person verbally. There's also a slight imbalance there, because if they speak to the officer, they're not being balanced in not speaking to the complainant either. Yep. So that's been my experience, and I believe that that's probably all as a result of poor funding.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right.
Okay, I'm sure we'll take that on board. If I can now call on, I think James is going to read out the statement from Mr. Aaron Preston.
Yes. So through you, Chair, there is a statement and a number of questions that Mr. Preston asked to raise, which have been shared with the Commissioner's office in advance. So, sorry, the statement, yes, and these are Mr. Preston's words, referring to the increase of £10 a year for Northamptonshire Police, and the £5 increase in the fire precept also. I feel that although personally I feel this is a low figure, and it expressed this in the initial survey sent to residents, it's important for the policing and fire services to have adequate equipment and bodies to support and protect our communities. As I have 2 local volunteering roles supporting the police, I'm aware of the local policing challenges, and this council and tax increase will contribute to improving availability of policing, as well as improve processes and equipment to speed up investigations in the fight against crime. It is also disappointing to Mr. Preston's questions then. The first then refers back to the minute, a statement in the minutes from the previous panel meeting, so I'll read that out for context. A panel member noted that the focus on prevention, partnership working and community engagement reflected in the draft police, fire and crime plan was welcome, but would have resource implications, and sought reassurance about how these would be met. The Commissioner made the following points, including he had previously been able to increase the resources available to support community safety in Northamptonshire from both national and local sources. As an example, the budget for policing had risen from approximately £110 million when he was elected in 2016 to approximately £150 million in 2021. Mr. Preston's question on that, or questions rather, what are specific plans going forward into 2022 for this, as previous neighbourhood watch alerts advising of area focuses of targeting specific area focus of targeting specific criminal activity, but how is this going to be tackled hasn't been made available. I understand that operational specifics cannot be discussed, but how are we to increase local resident engagement with the police if we don't know how we can support them or what initiatives are in place? For example, in the Far Cotton and Delaprey area, I'm having ongoing challenges with residents not sharing intelligence to the police, thus not forwarding to the local policing team. So there is still a general wall of silence, and officers are having to rely on their own observations to investigate. As the area police liaison representative for the Far Cotton and Delaprey Community Council, I'm finding it challenging to know how to ask local residents to focus on key issues if we don't understand specifics on how crime is going to be driven down. What is the basis of success of driving down reports of crime and arrests, convictions from a percentage figure? And after public consultation, as I believe a list of 3 is allocated, but what is there to show that these have not been successful when targeted within a quarterly period? What are the success factors? Mr. Preston's second question was around the snow van. What are the success factors involved in relation to reducing criminal activities and antisocial behaviour in the evenings? Has there been a before and after statistical analysis to see if police reported events have declined? What is the snow van trying to achieve? And then the third question he wished to raise, from regular discussions with police officers, I'm aware that there are still challenges with beat officers being tied up with paperwork, sometimes for hours when they are processing crimes, and those arrested and being brought into the station. This then reduces the footfall of officers in public. So is there an improved plan in place to reduce paperwork for officers and move this to civilian teams to process as part of the council tax increase? From what I can gather, some local police statistics are created manually, so why can't they be automatically collated for officers when their criteria is put forward, so this frees up their admin time? Surely automation should be adopted for reporting so the data is available proactively rather than having to keep asking for it.
Okay, I'm sure the was he thinks it's not enough money. So I think on the precept side, you know, it's one of the satisfied customers, but obviously has some perhaps performance queries. I don't know if you want to come back on that.
Yeah,
Stephen.
Madam Chairman, may I beg your indulgence, because I know how to address, and I'm sure the protocol's not from to answer. If I may, then may I just pass a couple of comments, if that's all right with you?
Yes.
First of all, can I thank you for taking the time to come today? Because obviously, anyone's interested. We do get mixture of people bothering to come. So first of all, a very big thank you to it. To the first speaker, Ms. Jones, thank you. And I would encourage you, because I agree with you in terms of funding, any support you could give by lobbying your MP would be very grateful in terms of the funding formula. I can only apologise because I think you've been a complainant. One of the things that the complaints department has suffered, because one of the ladies got recruited by the force in the latest detective one, so we're one down. Of course, with vetting taking something like 8 weeks, we have been down. So I apologise for any delay on that one. As to Mr. Preston's one, we'll probably provide a written response to some of those. But if I could give you some kind of quick anecdotal ones in terms of some of the stuff there, particularly on the police liaison representative. So it was a scheme for, this is more for the panel as well. It was a scheme that was launched in April 21. PLRs are supposed to be given information through an update letter sent out in the new NEAN-beat. It's moving ahead. There is an implementation plan. They're all supposed to get welcome packs, and I'm not quite sure that you're getting that by the sounds of it in terms and regular kind of information. So we'll have a look at that. But annually, the force will provide PLRs with an updated fact sheet setting out the methods, communication to PLRs will be supported by the communications department for both Northamptonshire Police and my own office. They will provide information such as national, county campaigns, legislation updates, and they'll be invited to contribute to things. So obviously, I think what you're saying is some more to go there, but also the bit you make, the point you make in there around community intelligence goes on to reinforce the fact as to why we're investing in neighbourhoods. It's only if you've got accessible police officer out there, whether it be the beat bus, whether it be any of those, that accessibility is what's going to enable people to share, and we've more to do. Although I was told this week now gone through 100, we were going to double it. I think we're on our way to try and get to treble, but we're ahead of schedule. Just on the Safer Nights Out bus, it is worth highlighting that's only been in operation less than 8 weeks. It wasn't aimed at reducing incidents of crime or ASB specifically. It was designed to provide support and triage services to those people who are vulnerable in the nighttime economy. And this is achieved by regular deployment of highly visible van into the heart of Northamptonshire town from 9 o'clock in the evening till 5 a.m. in the morning. It allows them, if they're feeling vulnerable, to charge a phone or other kind of support. I would also like to take a particular moment to thank the Guardian volunteers, because whilst I provide the van, they're the people kind of paperwork. Yes, ironically, this has just been made slightly more complicated by a thing called Director General's Guidance 6. It comes as a consequence of the Attorney General, and actually, of course, in a lot of cases, the end outcome that most of us would want to see is a judicial outcome or some form of positive action as a consequence of it. There is an extra burden that's been placed on police officers, maybe even to the point, and we're challenging this, that actually it outweighs the number of police officers that we've added as a part of Uplift. We've added over and above Uplift in terms of that. We've also invested in a program, solution called Click, which is designed to actually share data, and some of you have heard me kind of talk about that. And also there's £1.6 million we invested, Mrs. King, isn't it, in the upgrading the combined IT department to actually make sure that we could streamline our systems. And hopefully when ESN finally gets delivered, that will improve them further. I just thought I'd take a few moments to pass some comment on the things for everyone's, but we will provide a written thingy to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now over to the panel. Anyone would like to make any comments, questions?
That's the question. I thought my time was almost up. I do have a question.
You can ask to comment, you can ask to address the panel or to ask a question.
Well, you can ask to address the panel or to ask a question. If it's quick, because we have got.
I'm just wondering, I'm not sure how I can look at the performance data for the police. I did understand the one from the league table.
Okay, thank you.
There is a statutory obligation on me to publish performance data under a new thingy, so you'll start to see that come out from the office over the coming year. Just to reassure you, whilst Northamptonshire has been a struggling force for many years, as the recent HMIC report demonstrated, they've made genuinely real progress. They're not where they need to be yet, and on behalf of the public, I would say that they're not where I would want them to be on behalf of delivering a service here for residents. But they're genuinely making real progress. But there is data that we will be publishing on our website.
Thank you very much. Right.
They won't. They won't. There's no requirement for them to intervene.
So it's not like councils, for example, certainly don't intervene in this council. Really.
Sorry, I think we don't want to get into a sort of backwards and forwards here. As Stephen said, there is no mechanism. What the government does is they have the HMIC FRS, which does inspections and then gives a score to the forces, and obviously then the force react to that and make sure they improve themselves. Councillor Maxwell.
Well, I have to say, I was interested in listening to your speech. I am concerned about the fact that complaints aren't being followed up quicker than it seems. 6 weeks seems a long time. So is there maybe a temporary solution to this, maybe employing more people to actually follow up complaints?
I think Stephen said that he just lost one member of staff and he was replacing.
No,
him.
but that was in my office. I think what the lady's referring to is the delay in professional standards department. We have actually now, of course, professional standards department is by its very nature a very sensitive area, so it's around investigation of police officers. We do get, and I'm not saying that this is the case in ladies, they get a lot of spurious ones that take an awful lot of time. You've heard me talk, we've had some, and this isn't related to this lady, but we get a lot that, quite frankly, waste a lot of police time. So actually it's no one complaint. You could have a very significant breach that needs investigation, or someone that says, which is also why I took oversight of the complaints, because as you will have remembered on a previous presentation, I'm not sure you were here then, we had some determinations about what options we should or shouldn't take in terms of the level of inquiry. We took a higher up response than some of my kind of colleagues. So in other words, complaints kind of come back to me. You will also have seen that enmity to kind of do that. It's not as simple as. However, with the wider credibility around thing, we are looking at what can actually be done to actually increase our resources in PSD. But it's not the volume of complaints doesn't necessarily, it doesn't mean anything. Obviously, if you have a lot of high volume one, but the actual statistic by itself isn't it. We also go and scrutinise and look to see how they're done as part of our oversight. But then it is worth bearing in mind, there is that bit between operational independent. They work for the chief constable, and actually they're his officers, not mine.
If we can get back to the precept, if that's possible. Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, just to add my 50 cents as usual, I would like to refer to the fact I've underlined the word sceptical in my notebook. There's big promises made here, big commitments, and I fully endorse those, but there could be a potential rose-tinted glass view going on here, because I have to say, as we've just had from Miss Jones, and as you hear from residents, not just in the left behind areas, of course I talk about Kingswood very fondly, but not just in the left behind areas, this isn't always the reality of what goes on. So there is big promises made here, big commitments, and if these actually do materialise into engagement, improvement in the lives of vulnerable people, more police officers on the street, young people feeling safer, all people feeling safer, not just in left behind areas, then I can support that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just thank you for that, Councillor McGee. It is also worth bearing in mind that when you think we currently have over 500 police officers that have been here less than 4 years. So we have a significant, if you like, challenge is the wrong word. I'd probably prefer opportunity in terms of upskilling those people, but obviously that takes time. You can't go and pick a seasoned police officer, off of a tree and hope that in terms of all of the knowledge, that against the kind of backdrop of COVID and all of those. So actually there is a bit, and you and I have had discussions, I think, and my own measures say that public visibility is up, but engagement isn't at the same level. You and I have had discussions around it, getting them out of their cars, but then that also having to be married if they need to be kind of able to respond, which is why ring fencing neighbourhoods and the bit, and we've obviously only been able to do that as we get it. My serious hope is that, of course, the funding formula really comes through for us, and then that kind of really pushes over top. These will get solved, but it's not overnight, and I think that's kind of what the HMIC report says. You've made really good progress, but we don't.
I have a question which I have indicated when we had the budget online, and this is to do with PFCC initiative reserve. Two. There is a comment on the risk factor that is being indicated. Initiative not adequately define or deliver, hence poor. Perhaps you can describe, first of all, what are those initiative reserves that you are planning, and also, of course, why is it described as a risk and poor value for money? Thank you.
We are probably overly pedantic in highlighting kind of all of our risk. I've got on one hand, quite rightly, Mrs. King saying to me, "You've got it in reserves, you should spend it," but sometimes as a challenge, and I use that particularly some of kind of Nikki's work in the early intervention. Sometimes I can't prove it. It's a bit like sliding doors. Can I prove that that kid wasn't going to go on to knife someone? Can I prove that they didn't kind of go on to? Now I can do that in the overall crime. So overall crime in the county is down. Overall victims of crime is actually down even further. But actually, that doesn't tell the true story, because we've still got victims that aren't kind of getting a good enough service. I will be bringing forth what I intend. I have some ideas and some stuff that we're still working through, but as we're in negotiation with different parties, different authorities, I can't share them with you at this moment in time.
Commissioner, I understand that sometimes you cannot always indicate a value for money. However, there are other source of indication of KPI, which could be customer satisfaction or success rate for this initiative that you would provide. This would be a very good indication on a performance for this initiative, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Okay, Pauline.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Pauline.
My question is around your precept proposals. Okay, in 2021, 22, you had a precept amount of £13. For 2022, 23, your precept proposal is for £10. Can you please explain any foreseeable challenges or implications by setting a lower precept proposal this year that would have on the force delivery work program?
Government, there is a challenge for PCCs in that the referendum limit is setting, in other words, the maximum amount that we can raise is defined by a combination of the Home Office and also kind of through DLUC, I think is the way. I could have raised it was higher last year, but also so we are in difficult times, and so it's a good balance between the two. I'm quite comfortable that I've got a balanced budget for both, and we'll come on to fire, for both police and fire for the next few years. You're right, there are some significant risks out there. The biggest risk actually at the moment is the pensions. The cloud sergeant, one that is a very real risk. An immediate detriment is something that's me and Mrs. King spend more time talking about than we would kind of like to. But genuinely, I'm comfortable by it being almost a fixed amount for the next 3 years of the £10. That means that the public have some idea of what they're going to look at. That means inflationary wise, actually, it's slightly less. Everyone kind of knows where they three-year budget. So at this moment, I'm quite content. Myself and Mrs. King have quite a lot of conversations to make sure, should there be any kind of emergency, have we got sufficient additional resources in terms of our general fund? And I think we're quite comfortable in that. Mrs. King is always pushing me, and I think we are even looking at some move arounds of some underspends that we're working on through my office this year, but we haven't finalised what we'll do with those yet. But we're looking to make sure that we've got sufficient reserves. I'm comfortable with the 10, the indication that I'm giving, and obviously economically a lot could change. But if having listened to the statement from the Bank of England on inflation on my way in right now, I actually think that we're they've got bits about growth thingy and all those kind of things. I think I'm comfortable as I can be with the information in front of me that I've got. And to be frank, this is the first time, and we've lobbied for it, that we've been able to set a 3-year balanced budget. And it does require the force to make savings. One of the things I've asked them to do year on year is they need to make a 1% efficiency saving. What does that really mean? It doesn't necessarily mean it's cash. It means crime continues to change. Cyber taking on a higher one in terms of fraud, but try to balance all of the kind of competing demands. But then you do get some things, the government yesterday has only announced something around that they want to give policing the power to deal with noise nuisance. Well, that's currently an environmental health. So there's, as long as it stands right now with the current legislative framework, I'm comfortable with the budget subject.
pensions on Annex 3, you've got the summary of revenue and capital reserves. And on the pension reserve, it's higher, the first two columns than later. I just wondered why that was, since obviously we've got a big unknown, and you've actually said elsewhere that it could be a sort of 6 million hit, of which we are hoping that the government will pay 3/4, although that's all still to be decided. But I just wonder why in that case that pension reserve is lower for those later years.
Thank you, Chair. The reserve that we have for pensions is actually for ill health pensions. So that's very separate to the usual police pensions. So there is a pressure that comes on the revenue budget for ill health pensions, depending on who leaves and when they leave. So we use it as a smoothing reserve, Chair. So we, when we have more ill health pensions retire in the year, we use some from the smoothing reserve, or when they are forecast to, because they are in the process. When we have less in the year than what we've budgeted for, then we pop it in the pension ill health reserve. We don't think it's prudent to have that at a very high level, but we need it at a sensible level so we don't have to overstate the budget each year. It's a very difficult one to predict because obviously the ill health discussions take quite a long time to come to fruition, but it is very different to the usual police pension, which comes out of the revenue budget, which is the employer's pension contribution. That's where we feel the hit will be, and that's what we're lobbying for.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Sorry, Madam Chairman, just to kind of add on pensions, it is a significant risk to all public bodies in terms of some of the kind of age discrimination. The legislation, I believe, will be introduced in April, but won't come in until something like October 23, which is a risk. But I don't think the public would, how can I put this, like me to raise their council tax to stick it in a reserve in case there might be a pension. Then they kind of lost it in court.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Maxwell.
My question actually is actually part of the pension situation, which will be, as I can see from the report, a major issue. My concerns are in 2024-25, it equates to 6.4 million per year. Now, the government at the moment, they do provide funding towards the pensions, but this may increase. The question would be then, if what's now funded by the Home Office, what happens if they decide not to carry on? Now, they're already funding through the precept officers. And what happens if this happens? And where does it leave us in the future? It's no good covering up and thinking that this won't happen. You don't know when it might happen. And that has surely got to be a major issue in the finances in relation to having enough money to do things like increase police or increase other aspects of safeguarding the residents.
Stephen.
I will try and start. Shall I try and start that? If I can just highlight from the potential increases, we don't know what the range could be at this point. I think I've highlighted it could be anywhere from 0% or 30%, and we don't know what the Home Office contribution would be. We're modelling at 10%, and we're also modelling that the Home Office may fund 75% of it. What have we got to base that on? We've got history to base that on. So the last time the actuarial review took place, it did result in additional costs, and we do receive a pensions grant for that, for both fire and police, because they're unfunded pension schemes. unfortunately, the Home Office grant for it doesn't cover the full cost. I think it's unlikely that the Home Office would not continue to fund police and fire pension schemes. But whether they fund them to the level we wish and we feel that we need is the challenge. That's why we model them within the MTFP. We had hoped that there would be some clarity in the recent spending review, but both the Home Office police side and the Home Office fire side explain that those discussions are still ongoing with the Treasury at this moment in time. They don't have a formal response at this particular time. I can give you our assurance that we will continue to raise, lobby, make our representation known at the highest level, but it does affect every police, every commissioner and every single fire authority. So we are not alone.
And I think that's the bit I wanted to make. It's a national problem. I can't see a government staying in office very long if it suddenly decided not to fund the pension pots of all public sector workers. I think it'd be out of office pretty flipping quick. But you know, at the end of the day, we know it's a risk. There are ongoing conversations on it. We'll deal with it as it kind of comes down the line. Is it one that keeps you awake at night? No. I think we'll be able to deal with it, but as would be sensible, we highlight to you all the risks that are kind of there as well, which is why I liked it when Councillor McGee said through rose-tinted glasses. I'm like, wow, I'm not sure when we thought they were that rosy, but thank you.
Okay, Councillor McGee, you wanted to come back.
Thank you, Chair. My question goes back to, sorry to take away from the pension discussion, but my question goes back to ring fence funds for neighbourhoods. Is this neighbourhood policing in general? You know what I'm going to ask? Is this targeted neighbourhood police funding, particularly towards perhaps levelling up areas? How's that for me?
Of course, it's for the totality of neighbourhoods, but obviously one of the things that I hold the force to account is that the resources are allocated where they are most needed. One of the challenges, and I'm happy to take this outside of here, Councillor, is because actually, as you won't be surprised that as I went away from some of our various conversations and look at safer streets and also crime, whilst there might be some overall connection between deprivation and criminality, the two aren't necessarily the same. So actually it is about the police are there to fight crime and keep people safe. Now, keeping people safe is a kind of an important as part of the feeling safe. But I do hear you. We will be continue, and a large proportion of the ones that are recruited over the next kind of 18 months will actually be going to neighbourhoods. So actually it will be an expanded neighbourhood offering. So I do hope, even though that is in the totality, you will see more in your area. But I would also be a bit cheeky and remind you are here as a police and crime panel to look at the totality of the thing rather than lobby for your own areas. I'm not looking at Councillor McGee and someone else.
Yes, point taken. Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions, Commissioner. First of all, when you look at your general reserves, you've got £5 million worth of general reserves. When you consider WNC, who's got 4 or 5 times the size of budget, their general reserves are only 5 million as well. So why are yours so high?
I would argue. I'm going to let my colleague comment on that one. I say I might not, but I probably would rhetorically say, "Why are mine so high?" I'd say, "Why are yours so low?" But anyway,
I was expecting that one after I said it.
But I will comment further after Helen gives a more informed one.
Thank you. We look at reserves across how many earmarked reserves we've got. We look at what our potential future risks may be. We also are very conscious that in policing and fire, there's something called the big incident or the Bellwin kind of rules. And in policing, you have to fund the first £1 million of some big incident yourself before you can start claiming from the government. In fire, it's a similar kind of proposition. So we look at our reserves. CIPFA don't prescribe a level anymore. I've talked in the reserve strategy about a CIPFA a little on the fence. They say it depends on your overall circumstances, what you feel you need locally. So that's how we look at it. Personally, I feel 2% is too low. I don't think it gives you much scope if you need to dip into it. And the £5 million is a good buffer. It's also very low in policing as a level of general reserves. What we also don't carry is a whole lot of other earmarked reserves. Those other earmarked reserves have plans for them. This general reserve is if a major thing happens, if we need to dip into it. We also, sorry to go on a bit, but I do love this subject. We also do have to make sure that we meet the external auditor's value for money criteria, which is to ensure that our budget can always be balanced over a 3-year period. Okay. Make sure that we had enough there as that buffer to help us out if needed.
If in fact, when you think of our police force is so efficient, we don't use those 5 million reserves, what happens to them?
The good news is they sit there. And if you like, by the very nature of them being at 5 million, as you look at the capital one, it potentially becomes, and it'll be obviously a very active discussion between myself and Helen, what they stay as a percentage of thing. Where we tend to is I prefer to put into general things. If we've got an underspend, it's the sort of thing that you've kind of topped them up. And I think during our time, we have very gently kind of built them up. But if there's a major situation and suddenly there's I don't even want to prophesize an event because it'll be but actually, and we need to put a load of police officers kind of a street. The chief constable knows he can do it, or we have a major situation in terms of one of our buildings or something, then we've got the reserves to do it. Quite frankly, my judgment is they're adequate. That's backed up by JIAC, and I'm quite comfortable with them. But the good news is they are set there in the bank, and trust me, if you look at our reserve strategy, we're trying to earn some money out.
And just as the last question, with regards to when you were talking about 1,500 police officers, with regards to obviously in the budget as it stands at the moment, does this mean to say that for 23-24, you'll actually have no increase in your precepts?
No. And part of the just here's an interesting one for you. So first of all, when a police officer starts, their pay goes up in a scale, not just in terms of percentage. So someone can earn, and I'll get these wrong, a basic police constable can earn from anywhere from 24,000 to 45,000. So actually, bearing in mind what I was saying about experience, in theory, you want a healthy blend. If anything, we have more for cheaper. They will cost a bit more, but they will be more effective and more valuable to us. And no, because also, as inflation is where it is, and not that I have any say in it, although the salaries will go up and inflation and stuff like that. You know, in the same report that sounds like we were driving and listening to the same one from the thing. The cost of energy is one. One of them is actually, it's not really down as a risk right now, but one of the ones that does concern me is, for instance, we have this conversation about energy, and I think I had one around kind of green energy. So actually, electric police cars is going to be an interesting one. So if they're in pursuit and they haven't been charged up to the maximum, the public's not going to be very happy if they suddenly stop on the way through it. But actually it's worth, so in other words, ours would need to be on fast charge, which disproportionately is more expensive. Some of you have visited Derby House, which in itself is going to can host up to 400 people. The energy from that building is equivalent to 1 Tesla on fast charge. So you think, you know, we have a fleet of over 400 vehicles, and I don't think you've got enough infrastructure just to supply my vehicles, let alone the, so there are some very real challenges. And don't get me started on electric fire engines.
Thank you,
Okay,
Commissioner.
so I think, as someone said, with inflation and with salaries going up usually each year, then, you've got to take that into account. And if the government then give you extra responsibilities, if they don't follow that up with extra funding, then, I dare say that will eat into budget as well.
And I think Mrs. King has felt some frustration on the promises made by the government, and I'm not complaining about it, but actually it giveth with one hand and it taketh away. So actually the 1.2% social care, I completely understand why that's quite a burden when you think 85% of police cost is police staff and police officers.
Mrs. Shields.
Yes, my question to you, Commissioner, or Helen, is to do with adequacy of reserve, in particular the collaboration working. If the risk of the partner were to withdraw their funding, obviously their own budget are squeezed, what would be the impact on that?
Okay, the collaboration reserve is, as the region is not a legal entity in its own right, any unspent funding that is there for the regional activities is shared out on the recognised formula to each authority. So that's what the collaboration reserve is. It's not one that is strictly there for Stephen's use, but he does contribute to it as part of the collaboration. In terms of the collaborations, there are quite a lot of them. They could be legal services, they could be the serious crime ones, they could be quite a lot. There is a collaboration agreement which underpins every single one of those, and that talks about the arrangements for when somebody wishes to come out and 12-month lead-in time, so there's at least a 12-month notice period in there. When parties have come out of collaborations in the past, it's been a concentrated piece of work to actually look at that and to unpack the activities and to unpick the finances associated with that each collaboration, because the impact is slightly different for each collaboration. I'm not sure if that's answered your question, Mrs. Shields.
Yes, partly. What I wanted to know is that the impact, say for instance, for the sake of this conversation, I don't know the numbers within that group of partners, but say for instance, because of the situation we are in today with the COVID economic situation and so forth, say a third of them would retract from their partnership. What would be the long-term impact? Because you have said that they will have to give you notice in 12 months anyway.
I'm going to start off, and I think Stephen will probably put it right. This collaboration relates to the 5 police and crime commissioners in the region. Okay, so this is the specific collaborations that we are talking about that provide regional policing activities that the local forces don't do themselves. So it's not a short or a quick fix. And now I'll hand over to Stephen, who'll give a better.
I think you're actually, so those are very much policing collaborations of which in terms of control. I think what you're probably worried about, which I can assure you I share your concern, is the wider collaboration in the county. So, you've got some local, you've obviously got 2 unitaries, they're starting to understand it. Nikki's working some stuff. I'm particularly worried about because I'm going to use it as an example. Nikki might want to comment in a minute, but the Sunflower Centre, which provides for high-risk domestic violence support, has been, quite frankly, if I hadn't lost my hair through policing, I'd certainly have lost it through that. So you've got disproportionate funding. I'm not targeting anyone, but for instance, Daventry was one of the worst funders of the of that in terms of domestic violence, not related to anyone entering, but there seemed to be this impression that it didn't happen there. And so the former chief exec wouldn't give much to it because it was made up of funding from the county. The primary three were myself as the biggest funder, the CCG, and also NCC. And then money was topped up from each of the authorities. Now, of course, at the moment, we had a commitment from the previous authorities that would maintain it, and there's been some challenges in kind of getting it. So those tend to be dealt with through our commissioning budget, if you like. But there are some, there is more to go because you've also got, you've got a children's trust, you've got access to systems, so people withdraw access to systems, that increases risk, it increases financial risk. All of those conversations are going on and we speak. And to be frank with you, it's quite an unsettled time at this moment. And I should probably be making representation to leaders and councillors because I genuinely have some serious concerns about some of the actions that are going on as we speak, because they're genuinely not making people safer. It sounds a bit process over protection for me.
Okay. Just go back to a question that Councillor Maxwell was asking earlier on about consultation. Do you, obviously I know that, you're always trying to get the most responses from a consultation. And this consultation was better than the police and crime plan. Are you investigating other ways, or are you content with that? The level of consultation responses?
I'm never satisfied with the volume of things, but the real difficulty is on this one is I suppose that at its core the key test of whether people are happy is actually at the election, because ultimately it's there to inform the decision that I need to make, and quite frankly, if the public don't like it, I'll know about it at the next election. I don't think we could actually have, with some of the and there is an engagement report that I wish I got in front of me. I'll give you some of the statistics. Our outreach was hundreds of thousands of people. All of you, but we've held ones with councillors, parish councillors. We've done all sorts of things to make sure we reached out. We've gone out in terms of different areas to make sure that we had geography, demography, and all of the different kind of mixtures to make sure that we could. And there are some areas that could definitely do better. And funny enough, there was an interesting one because some council said, "Is it enough?" And I was like, "It's statistically relevant." And actually, it's funny. I was talking to the Home Office, and he said, "Blimey, I wish I got that many for some of my national consultations." So I did wonder what the heck they're doing with theirs if that was the particular case. Yes, in the end, I have to make a decision based on it, which is what I'm proposing to you today. Does it inform me and make me comfortable about it? Yes. Is it as large as I would like? No.
I think that, to be honest, people tend to respond when they're not happy. So the fact that they don't respond, it probably means that they are happy.
And we do find out. I would say content. I think some would agree with it. I'm not content with our Northamptonshire Police's performance. I want to see it continue to improve, but I do know that they're going in the right direction, and I'm assured on that basis. But let's put it this way: they're certainly not coasting yet. When we've got some goods and outstandings in our inspection reports, then I shall start to feel a bit more comfortable. Obviously, part of the reason we took the active role in the complaints is it gives an indication of some stuff like that. So I just want to reassure everyone, no, I'm not happy, but I know the trajectory is really good. And it's quite a different place to where it was a couple of years ago.
We've actually reached the end of the time that James allocated, and I've now got 3 hands up all of a sudden. So very quickly, please.
Very quickly indeed. I did notice, and perhaps obviously it's not particularly comprehensive on the financial statements, but there's no appreciation or indication of sale of assets.
There are sale of assets in our capital programme. So you don't have the full capital programme here, because obviously we do that separately in our budget process. We try and apply things like grants, capital receipts from sale of assets very early to our capital expenditure to minimise our borrowing. So it's very rare, unless we've got a really big capital receipt, that it'll sit there in the reserve, if you like, for a year or more. Okay, and if it's under 10,000, it's classed as de minimis within the revenue anyway.
And one that's worth, and I take Corby Police Station, I take Kettering Police Station, and actually Toaster Police Station. One of the challenges of the past is a joined up estate was a great thing, but some you've got, so if I use Kettering or Corby, it's less within Toaster because I bought it. So in other words, we've got part of buildings owned by police, by essentially me as the, and then the other half by HMCTS. So actually, in some instance, we also then, because it's the same building, actually heating is run from one part into others. Those have also been quite complicated to undo, or in terms of some of the development. In the end, the easiest way we find is sadly purchasing further, buying them out so we can sell it, which is kind of what we've done in Toaster. So if you're interested for a care home in Toaster, we can help you.
Okay, Councillor Maxwell.
I've just got two quick questions. Your beat bus broke down this week, actually. So I was in Abington Park. My question is, I did speak to the officers of the beat bus, and I would like to know, is the beat bus going to go out to places like Collie Weston, so they go right out, or is it just going to be Northampton? That's the first question.
I'm going to answer it because you're such a lovely lady, but I'm still not quite sure what this has got to do with the precept.
Well, it comes under, actually. Okay. It does come under, you've got, there's
no, I'm just teasing you. You bet. I'm saddened to hear one broken down because they're new as well, which is particularly concerned. We have two, it is worth highlighting. There was one for the north and one for the west. One of the things, and I freely admit, I'm not quite sure we're there yet. I want to make sure there is a regular programme and a schedule of it that people can look up online and you know where they're going to be. It's ironic that Councillor McGee is not there because actually she would be jumping at the bit with you, because I know that I saw an email from her to the local policing around one that was going to be in an area that she was interested in, and they didn't appear to be giving a lot of notice. So actually there is still work to be done in that way.
So my next question is on page 41, you've got a budget breakdown, and on that budget breakdown, you actually don't have anything whatsoever. We've just been talking about vehicles, but there's nothing there about the costs of the vehicles, given the fact that you said you have 400, is that correct? 400 vehicles? They must cost some money either in replacement or actually looking after them.
Just to help me, which number are you looking at?
So it's 105. Here on page 41.
Shall I help while you're looking? Okay. In terms of the capital replacement of the vehicles, Councillor Maxwell, they will be in the capital programme, and I think there is a line in there that says fleet or vehicles in the report that we move along to. I will have a little look in a second. In terms of the running costs of the vehicles, they are within the Chief Constable's budget that the Commissioner negotiates with him, so they will be in his budget, and the running costs will be under, I think they're under other costs. I believe they'll be under other costs on the Chief Constable's force budget. Does that help? And then let me flick for capital while I'm looking.
You've got a budget breakdown, 22-23.
Yeah.
And whilst there's an increase in the budget, I didn't realise it comes under the budget.
Yeah, so we don't bring the data because here looks at the overall envelope. We don't bring the full detail of the force budget that the Commissioner has negotiated with the Chief Constable, because that goes through the accountability boards in the Commissioner's negotiations with the Chief Constable, but we do bring the overall envelope and we show you where the main elements of the funding has gone to the Chief Constable and a detailed breakdown on the Commissioner's side.
I mean, I have asked this question before, but I haven't got the result.
About the numbers of vehicles, we had a reply about that with a detailed how many there were. No, because that is part of the Chief Constable's budget. Yeah.
But just to assure you, which I think is the question you want, am I certain that we're driving as much value for money out of it as we can? No, we weren't. However, by bringing together our combined, so one of the things that, one big thing which is very boring and very but very important, using the Max Keller report on there, the boring but important. By the creation of our enabling services, why was that so important? So that's a combined enabling services for police and fire, but for HR, for finance, for ICT, for estates, and of course for vehicles. We have procured and are currently in the middle of fitting out a combined facility that will do both. This both brings efficiencies and cost savings. So we at all times, by bringing professional individuals to actually make sure that we've also got telematics, and maybe it might, if you like, perhaps what we'll do is we'll get someone like Lem to come and do a little presentation to you on the fleet and some of the work that they're doing, that actually to give you the same comfort that I get. But actually, we've just paid for telematics. What's telematics? It means we know what speed they're driving, where they were, whether they had their blue lights on, so we can analyse if they crash, whether availability of vehicles, are they driving as efficiently as they could, all of those sorts of things. To basically, is the question I need to know the answer. Is 400 the right number? Should it be 450? Should it be 500? Should it be 300? Those numbers in terms of that. So there's a lot of work been done. But what we'll do is we'll take an action in the way, and we'll perhaps get someone to come and talk about our and we can do it in the context of our fleet facility and some of the stuff that we're doing. You'll find it quite interesting.
Can I just say one more thing? The reason for asking the question was because when I go to village meetings, that's the question they ask me.
Okay, I think I'll bring Mrs. Jones in just as the last question, but I'd like to just thank your team for doing the budget. We had two budget workshops, one to explain the sort of background and one to go into the budget itself. So that was very helpful. And if you didn't manage to attend that, then there were slides that were issued. So that was to do with the funding formula. You said that there, is move afoot to update it, and we've been told that year after year. But if there's anything the panel can do to support that, please do let us know so that we can reinforce. What we hear, from the speakers is we're not charging enough, but we have a limit, and we obviously don't want to overload the public either. So, but from the point of view that if we're not getting that extra income from the precept necessarily, but from the central funding, then there will be more possibility of doing more that I'm sure you would like. So, Mr. Shields, just last question.
Yes, actually, I concur, Chairman, what you say about the funding formula. Actually, I was going to ask you, Commissioner, the deprivation factor percentage, is that being put forward? For instance, when you compare Northamptonshire with Nottingham, I know that Northamptonshire has had an increase in population, 10%, you've indicated. Do we know today if also the deprivation factor has increased alongside with this increase in population, because that would be a very good argument to put forward, because I know that having worked in that area before, then looking at the deprivation factor as a key element as well as a population factor.
Yes. It is taken into account. It is a part of the new funding formula. The key bit that we're needing them to take into account is it doesn't take enough of a weighting for population. And that's been the problem. I mean, I probably could kind of look it up. I did some work a couple of years ago, and I did enjoy myself, didn't I, Mrs. King, would take per head of population and stuff like that. And disproportionately, I think, you know, give some, Nottingham spent something like £700 per head of population in terms of policing. Northamptonshire gets something like 560. So actually disproportionate. If we had the same funding formula as Nottinghamshire, I would give the Chief Constable an extra £30 million a year. That'd be a lot of extra police officers. So actually we genuinely want to see it, but actually the worst things that happened at the moment, the funding formula of old wasn't very good, but at least it was updated every year. 10 years ago, they stopped doing it because they were going to put a new one in and they didn't. So it feel like it's kind of a double whammy. Just my final one is, because I particularly want to thank Helen and her team, but also Deborah and her team, because actually if you go to Appendix A, it shows you all of the kind of reach that we had in terms of the people there. So actually it's a combination of all those in terms of informing.
Yeah.
I'll let you vote now, Madam Chairman.
James, do you need to come in at all, or?
Not especially, Chair. I mean, really, just to highlight at this point in the discussion, a point from the covering report on statutory responsibilities. So the options available to the panel in terms of reaching a conclusion and a recommendation on the proposed precept as set out page 20 for para 4.2. So to support the proposed precept without additional qualification or comment, to support the proposed precept and make additional recommendations on it, or the option of vetoing the proposed precept on the required majority.
Okay.
Just seemed helpful to refer back to those at this stage in the discussion.
So can we sort of bring it to a close, and as we've been told, the options are to agree it with no reservations, no extra recommendations, or to put any sort of recommendation on it, or to veto. So if I can have a proposer for Mrs. Shields, what are you proposing?
I propose £10.
Are you proposing we accept the Commissioner's precept as it is?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Pritchard.
I would like to second that particular motion.
Okay, so we have a proposer and a seconder to accept the precept as it is. All those in favour? Aye. Mrs. Shields, you didn't vote. You just proposed. I'm assuming you're voting for it since you proposed it. Yeah, and that is unanimous. So yes, Councillor Maxwell did vote. Yes, yes, yeah, yes, and so, you know, I don't need to say any against, because I think as far as I could see, everybody put their hand up. Okay, well, thank you very much for that discussion, and we now move swiftly on to the proposed fire precept, which is item 7. So over to you, Stephen.
Madam Chairman, the report in front of you today sets out my 4th precept proposal for Northamptonshire Commission, the Northamptonshire Commission of Fire and Rescue Authority. As I explained in my introduction to the police precept report, we're in a period of uncertainty. It is a 1-year financial settlement, and we all face a cost of living rise. It's imperative that any rise in the fire precept is justifiable and required to help deliver service that is both sustainable and has the ability to stay stay sustainable and invest in its future. However, as members will be aware, since January 2019, when I became responsible for the governance of the fire and rescue, financially things have not been easy. We were presented with a service that had significant revenue budget shortfalls, no reserves, and no capital programme. That is why I set in place a 3-year programme to build a sustainable base budget, a realistic capital programme, and establish an adequate level of reserves. This programme has included a robust and relentless lobbying campaign to raise with the government the budgetary issues we faced and to secure a permanent increase in the base budget formula. I'm immensely grateful for your support and the help and assistance and support we've received from our parliamentary colleagues. The government has listened and has provided the lowest 8 precept fire services with an option to levy a £5 precept flexibility.
I'm sorry, if we could not have talking in the background, please. Carry on, sorry.
Thank you. If this would provide an additional base budget increase of almost £1 million. I'm mindful of the impact of any increase on households, and I'm grateful to all who responded to the consultation and heartened by the support of 61.3% of Northamptonshire residents who are prepared to pay £5 or more if they're able to for our fire service. Furthermore, I'm delighted that almost 64% of those who responded thought fire were doing a good or excellent job. Therefore, today, I'm proposing to increase the fire precept by £5 per annum for a band D to £68.20, which equates to just 10 pence per week. Well, it's actually fractionally under, but bear with me, 9 point something or other, I think it is actually. Whilst there'll still be a need for some savings over the medium term, based on our current assumptions, this increase, together with those savings will enable me to deliver another balanced budget for the next 3 years. Furthermore, this will enable, Councillor Pritchard will be pleased about this, an adequate level of reserves to be maintained, which is essential to meet unexpected or unforeseen circumstances. I think it's also important to note that the capital programme is now an integral part of Fire's ongoing operational and financial plans, and we have a robust system in place to scrutinise the affordability and deliverability of the proposals being put forward by the service. An updated capital programme has been approved as part of the budget setting process and form part of today's report. I'm still awaiting a response from the Home Office to my request for one-off capital funding to mitigate some of these costs, and anything we will receive will obviously benefit the revenue budget in future years. Throughout the report, we've demonstrated not only the amount of work we have delivered to drive up performance and efficiency, but also set out the robust and effective financial controls we've put in place that will support our medium and long-term plans. Our challenges, such as the potential future cost of pensions, as we discussed earlier, are being dealt with proactively at both a local and national level to secure funding for both fire and police services. Looking towards 22-23, the budget for the Fire and Rescue Service will be approximately £4.6 million more than the budget we inherited from the former County Council. This equates to a revenue increase budget of 20% since 2018-19. And while savings are still required, I'm proud that the combination of our 3-year plans and extensive lobbying we've been able to put the service on a much more resilient financial footing. I'm proud of how far we have travelled, and thanks to the great deal of hard work you have in front of you today, a fair and affordable precept that seeks to deliver a balanced budget over 3 financial years. In fire, 74% of funding comes from council tax and business rates. Collecting this funding on fire's behalf is a big task. And again, I would like to extend my appreciation to both unitary councils for their hard work in securing such high collection rates. Madam Chairman, today's report sets out my precept proposals for the service, together with an overview of the budget, capital programme and medium-term financial plan, along with the reserve strategy, which have informed my proposal. These represent the outcome of a huge amount of work. I'd like to thank everyone who's involved, but particularly Mrs. King, who spent a lot of our time and hours on it, putting all of this together. I'm sure your husband will be glad to have you back. I hope so. The proposal to increase the precept by £5 per annum, or just 10% per week, represents the best deal for residents for Northamptonshire and the future of this vital service, and I commend it to the panel.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchard, you still got your mic on, sorry. I was just going to start off by saying the transformation or the change and the extra funding that has been put into the fire and rescue since you've taken over is really commendable. But I'm still really quite saddened to see in the charts that we are still second lowest. And whereas West Midlands is actually the lowest council tax, they actually had the highest spending power. So just, you know, looking at the precept on its own is not sufficient. You have to look at the total of the spending power. And there again, even though we're second in that as well, and we have the lowest reserves. So we've done a tremendous job to get where we are, but I think there's still some way to go to get parity with the rest of the country.
And I think that's the problem, by raising it so that they let the whole bottom eight raise it by £5 means by the very nature of it, you'll essentially stay at the bottom.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, but that flexibility has obviously been very welcome. That you've been able to do that. Do I have any questions, Mrs. Shields?
Yes, Commissioner, I have a question about the Legacy Capital Programme that you have been lobbying the Home Office. Do you know if the Fire Minister has given you an answer or when?
One always has to be careful in these situations, so we are working hard behind the scenes to do so. And to be honest, any money that we are fortunate enough to receive would probably come as a consequence of kind of budgetary underspends, which of course, given the financial environment there, I'm sure the Treasury will wish to whisk back to themselves. So we are at their mercy. We've done all we can. We are hopeful, but we don't know as yet.
Councillor Maxwell.
Well, I have three questions. The first thing, obviously, is £5 enough? When you look at the fire service, which is sort of like the poor relation, really, in many ways. But I say that because I think that you did actually purchase some vehicles which would go into would actually meet the needs of high-raised flats. And whilst there are not the same quantity of high-raised flats as there are in London, I think that, you know, we do have an increase in large warehouses, B8s, which have sort of like shot up over the last year, particularly, I have to say, in Corby. And therefore, are the vehicles there to meet the need should it need be? And the numbers of actual personnel is something that we're not familiar with. I don't think it's actually in the report how many fire people we actually employ. And it would be useful from the residents' point of view, particularly when parishes print what they've actually discussed at meetings. It would be interesting for them to know exactly what the fire service actually does and how it meets the needs of the residents, because each village has a different need according to what happens. But I think now the actual layout of Northamptonshire is changing, more housing, more areas of industrialisation. What are we actually doing about it?
I should take all of those. Is £5 enough? Well, look, I've just lobbied hard to get £5. To be fair, you know what? Getting a load of money in one go is never a kind of a good thing. To be honest, in all of these, and it kind of goes back to the point around one of the members of the public around kind of £10. To be blunt, the government of the day, of whatever colour, needs to do away with some of these limits, or actually set an upper limit, because actually sometimes the problem is by some of these disparate, like the bit over the £10, £13 or whatever, you don't, and that's why I do welcome the government giving the £10 over 3 years, because actually it doesn't mean you've got to maximise it all out, which is really bad for residents, on the basis that you might not have that flexibility in the future. But there is a balance. At the end of the day, fires on a year-on-year basis continue to decline. Now, in fairness, I think they've probably bottomed out now, and actually we need to kind of watch that, because smoke alarms in terms of things that do that. So I'm going to jump to your last question. Is £5 enough? I'm comfortable with the budget that we've got right now, and actually I think that's why the investment enabling services, if you like, the professionalisation of the people that support both police and fire, means that we need to work hard to drive those efficiencies out before this default thing of let's just go and ask residents to kind of pay more money. So yes, on both of these, I'm comfortable that it's a fair and balance between the two. On the one of and it's interesting, because one of the things I spend some time thinking about is policing is very demand-led, whereas fire actually is kind of insurance policy that you hope you don't need. And one of the things, funny enough, I'm actually off to Cornwall in the winter, I just like to add, in a couple of weeks' time, to actually go and see their tri-service. So actually they've got people who are both co-responders, police officers or PCSOs, and also firefighters in communities. That's something I'm very interested in, because actually it might be that there's a kind of an evolutionary model that we should be looking as to what the future looks like, because it can't be right that you've got those very valuable resources sat just waiting for a fire. There's other things they can do, and for instance, you mentioned around there, so actually there's some more statutory obligations around kind of fire inspections, and one of the ones, those ones is law. You also mentioned high rise. People might not have noticed, and to give you some idea, there are about 12,000 high rises roughly in the UK. Some might not have noticed there potentially is going to be an inspection regime that is attended to medium rise. Now, high rise, what does that mean? That's anything above 10, which we've probably got. We've got 25, 26 in the county. Medium rises is about 4 floors. Well, I can tell you, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of those. It's a disproportionately will affect us in a more significant way. So on the current landscape and the current workload, yes, I am. If that inspection regime changes kind of quite significantly, yes. But I want you to know, looking very hard to see what good, like I said, Fleet was a good example that we can share resources to do that. Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to edge up the amount of money that is spent on the front line. I want to make sure that visibility and accessibility, and that then means, and it's not, there has to be a relentless kind of psychology of transformation and all, because also there will come a point, I know we joked about in terms of noise thing, if you want policing to do more, or, and I'm not aiming at yourself, we're going to have a joke about after trading standards, if councils and other people pull back, police and fire continue to be those 24/7 businesses that people kind of relate to. They can't keep on doing more. So there's at some point, if we're not careful, there's going to have to be a conversation that says, no, I'm afraid we can't do that. If you want them to do that. And that's, we're not at that point, but there's certainly going to be those sort of, because also you can't continue to just keep putting more and more money in so it can do everything and everything. There's got to be a kind of a balance, because at the end of the day, you know, people want to spend their own money on their own kids and stuff like that. So,
Mrs. Shields.
Yes, Commissioner, I noticed that there has been a very successful joint support service arrangement that you've indicated and a reduction of the charge for governance and strategic support. My question actually is to do with the governance transfer into the capital program, the main impact on a medium-term financial plan. Being the revenue cost of financial capital. Now you say that you have, the PFCC has written to Lord Greenhow, the Minister of State for Building Safety, and you were seeking a one-off capital funding to support and to mitigate this cost. Have you received anything as today to this issue?
Not yet, Mrs. Shields. They are looking at it in terms of how much funding the Home Office have available before the end of the financial year. I do remind them regularly, and they know that they're waiting to respond to me. So we haven't had a response yet, but we will keep pushing for one. They understand the issue, they understand the problem, and they are very open to trying to help us with it. But for the budget, we have not assumed that anything comes from them. So if it does, it will reduce those revenue costs a little bit more, which will be a bonus.
We haven't got it, so we can't spend it.
No.
So you've been prudent.
We have been very prudent.
That's what I like to hear. Thank you.
I think actually, I mean, when you're talking about the high rise, I think you'd said previously that the house and multiple occupation were more of a worry. And that is actually an item that we've put on our April agenda, so that, you know, we can look into that a little bit more, because obviously, you know, we have increasing numbers of HMOs. So, Councillor Pritchard.
A very quick question. Could you please explain capital finance in RCCO?
It's, sorry, I should have put it in full the first time, shouldn't I really? It's revenue contributions to capital. So it's a budgeted contribution from the revenue budget towards capital to reduce the costs of borrowing. It helps financing and reduces the cost of borrowing. So it's a revenue.
Yeah, because I gather you can't transfer from capital to revenue, can you?
No.
That's what I thought.
It goes the other way.
Any organisation that did that would be running dodgy finances. Yes, we won't be doing anything like that. And look, what we try and do is, if there are underspends, now, as we, particularly now that we are reaching reserves that we were never happy with them, are we, Mrs. King? But we are finding that healthy balance between them. If we've got underspends, then that's the place you would put them. Anything that we can do to reduce the cost, because particularly for the fire has a particularly legacy challenge. Its capital program relative to its revenue budget is particularly challenging. So, which is why we've written to the Home Office in the hope that it'll help us mitigate it. If there's kind of any underspends, we try and move them towards it. And should, for instance, we get any money for the capital, would use it against probably shorter life assets, which would actually give us a, if you like, increased revenue in the next couple of years, if you like, rather than which of course goes into the base, but you know.
Councillor Maxwell.
I have two questions. Given, and it may not necessarily come into this, but on page 89, we're looking at the COVID report. Did we actually get funding back from the government from the input that the personnel were involved in this?
Yes.
And the second question is, given that we've got 5 wells just opened up, are we going to make sure that they are fully resourced regarding the fire service and equally the police?
Yes and no. So actually, one of the first things today, there's a lot of engagement with Five Wells, and I commend the team there in terms of their outreach. For your benefit, I think we're looking at over 1,600 customers that they'll be dealing with. You've got a brand new prison, and the governor's ambition is to make it the best prison in the UK. I think the Minister of Justice wants them to make it the best in Europe. He says, well, I can't compare. It's not easily comparable. And actually, there's a lot of kind of conversation. I was actually interested why someone hadn't asked me about, if you looked in, there was a one that looked like I was spending less money on kind of reoffending in one of the years, if you in terms of it from a policing point of view, but actually that's as a consequence of the government's reorganisation of probation and some really great work in Nicky's team in terms of making sure that that kind of combined working. Yes, we will continue integrated offender management, whether it be served, whether it be in policing, whether it be in terms of probation, continue to be something we need to continue to work with. But also there is some work that the prison's doing and supporting them, and I know your council is working with them as well, is to actually make sure that kind of rehabilitation and to make sure people kind of come reoffending. Because a lot of people don't realise, in the past, if you exit prison, then in the past they kind of gave you, I think it's sub £50. And that's kind of it. Your chances of going and reoffending. So you're probably going to migrate back to the people who, quite frankly, were your friends. Your environment is the word I'm probably looking for. And then we're surprised when they kind of reoffend. So actually making sure kind of training is done. So in terms of partnership, in terms of kind of possibilities, a lot of people don't appreciate. We actually already have several prisons in the county. They're in the top up at Onley and I can't remember the other one. Top of my head, there's Onley and
there's Rye Hill.
Rye Hill. Yeah, the other one's yeah, but the other one isn't being used, is it? Because it's the youth offender. Anyway, up towards Rugby Way. So we actually have some good lessons in terms of work. There is obviously some stuff that we will be, there's that on the rehabilitation. There is also stuff that we'll be careful of, because if you've got inmates, will people go to very creative ways to get drugs into prisons? So there is some additional bit. There is obviously an extra workload on Northamptonshire Police. All those are kind of taken into account in the force's strategic planning in terms of the longer term. But will there be opportunities to work them? Yes, there are, and we absolutely we will. I am slightly concerned that what it will look like, because it's supposed to be a resettlement. But without being rude, we haven't got 1,600 people that we've arrested and put in prison in Northamptonshire over the last couple of years. So by the very nature, they might become coming out and will leave the county. But actually, it's a wonderful place to live. So you never know, we might end up. So we need to take those things into account.
Can I just follow up on that one?
Okay.
Well, I think one of the things which is concerning the residents, actually.
And I would remind you, we are on fire.
Yes. No, we're not on fire. No, it's okay. The bell hasn't
On the
rung.
fire precept, I apologise.
Yes.
It did wander off there, I apologise.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is actually to do with fire. So one of the questions is, given it's such a massive complex over at Wellingborough, I think the worry is, do we have the resources to meet, should it happen, or should anything happen, like people deciding to set fire to things? What provision is there going to be there, and how much do we get back from the government in looking after such a big establishment?
In a word, nothing. It's part of our fire cover. You'll be pleased to know, though, work is going on. I know. I was talking fire, both police and fire, in terms of a lot of work's being done in conjunction with, in terms of mitigating, in terms of the risk. I mean, relatively, it's on the positive, can't spread. It's contained.
Question I'm asking you
I don't think you'll probably find as well that it's bringing some prosperity to the county. So you actually at the moment you're getting the money and I'm paying for it at the moment, where it probably looks like because you're getting your council tax receipts rather than the on your business rates and some bits like that. No, in essence, done properly and in conjunction with, it can be a benefit to us as a county in terms of some of their outreach work, some of the stuff that they might want to do in communities. And that's got to be done carefully to kind of go, some of these kids that think gangs are glamorous, I think we can show them some people that demonstrate it's not. But, you know, myself and Nicky had some quite serious conversations about some ones where, what was the one? It was all the rage that everyone was doing it, and it was based when they were taking kids into prisons, and actually all it did is it took away the fear, so it went the other way. So there is a bit about how you manage kind of some of those. I can't remember what the program is.
There is quite a lot of research to indicate that shock tactics actually don't really work for the majority.
Okay.
So it is important we do it and in conjunction with, but you know, it's part of the requirement for the county. The good news is we have a good provision in Wellingborough, and I think it'll be good for the economy. And having met the team there, I think there's someone you can kind of work with.
Okay. Pauline.
Yes. Going back to the fire precepts, the fire service depend on receiving a 63% funding through the council tax precept.
74 in it, I think.
Sorry?
Oh, business rates and council tax. Sorry, yes.
So therefore, could you assure us, especially in the current climate, that if the preset amount that's possibly going to be expected is not received, can you assure us that the deliveries of the fire service and support towards the work of the fire service is being taken account of and won't be impacted negatively?
Shall I start? Both Stephen and I were both going for the button, weren't we? We were both going for the button. That's a really good question. Members will remember that 2021-22 was a difficult time when we came and set these precepts last year, because the tax base had actually gone down, and that really did worry us, because that's the first time in my time that it has gone down. As such, at the end of last financial year, Stephen set up something called a funding reserve to actually smooth that impact if tax bases or business rates do go . So we did preempt that based on 21-22 because it was a risk.
Yeah, and just on that, and that's why in both of my things, I thank fundamentally it's the residents of Northamptonshire that are paying it. It's also making sure, and we contributed to it, Mrs. King can comment on it in more detail than me, to make sure that in terms of vulnerability, in terms of some people who, if they couldn't pay, in terms of that we contributed, but actually you've got some authorities that are kind of good at collecting the cash, if that makes sense. And that doesn't mean in a menacing way, whereas actually that's not always the case in some part of the country. And that then means there's a higher burden on a smaller part than kind of a broader one, which you kind of get as a consequence of Northamptonshire. But as we said, we've smoothed it, and in some respects, there's some assumptions, and in simple terms as well, they kind of guarantee us an amount, and which is why there's an overage and an under that kind of sorts it out at the end of the year, and then the funding reserve smooths it out further beyond that. I probably didn't put it as well as Ellen, but you know.
I do know what you mean, and sorry, I did eventually get the question out. It takes me a while to kind of formulate.
It's a bit a concern that the collection rate it's a bit of an unknown, isn't it? But you obviously have to model on sort of your best guess, best workings out of last year and previous years, etc. So, but that flexibility on the reserve certainly gives some sort of comfort that will be smoothed out as a result. So, do I have any other questions, Councillor Maxwell?
Well, I'd just like to follow up on that because I think this year is going to be completely different to last year in so much that collecting the revenue isn't going to be that simple for some people.
Well, certainly, yes, last year and this year, certainly.
Yeah. So I therefore think, although I have to say we're in the north, we're quite good at collecting money in the right way. But I think that's why you have a reserve, in order that you can have a backup in case something does crop up.
Mm, yeah.
Can I just add, Chair, we're
Yes.
really lucky in this county. We've got 2 unitaries who do very good estimates, and we work very closely with them. So they give us really good estimates of their tax bases and what the deficit position is looking like. So we do make sure we all use the same information.
It's worth, not only you've got collection rate, you've also got, house buildings, when they come on stream, when they collect council tax, all of those it actually is quite it's definitely, there is very much science in there, but there's a bit of art too, isn't there? I think it's fair to say, yes. Well, I don't want to get into a competition between the West and the North. I mean, it feels that we would probably argue at the moment that both are, is our observation, if you don't mind me saying.
Mrs. Shields.
Yes, my question is probably Helen, you will be the best person to answer it, although I'm sure, Stephen, you know all the facts and figures. This is to do with ICT and operational cost. Now, I know that once again, you've written to the minister seeking a one-off financial support to mitigate the revenue cost. Do we know if you have received any information about that?
We've written to the minister this year for capital costs. Well, for 22-23, we've written for capital costs. In 21-20, we seem like we've been writing letters all the time. I do apologise. In 21-22, we did write again, and 2021 asking for revenue money and for reserves, both of which they gave us, but they were one-off 1 year, one-off only. So the writing that we've done at the moment is asking for some capital funding that they haven't come back to us on yet.
Well, just on that, the investment that we've made in having a combined ICT team both creates opportunities for people in both police and fire. It also creates resilience in both organisations. At the moment, we are over investing because, and particularly on the, I would say there was quite scary resilience, I would say, in the fire ICT area in terms of both knowledge and systems, so that essentially having a much larger team, and we're over investing in those, if that makes sense, to make sure that we're ready. There's both a bit of catch up, but actually to also kind of make sure that we jump. One of the questions was kind of around use of reporting. So like I say, them using both the same analytics piece, there are now adjuncts to contracts where we're doing it for both, which reduces the cost for both and gives us slightly bigger buying power. So there will be some benefits that will come over time as well.
Talking about what you're just saying about the capital and especially in a fire ICT, there was an arrangement last year to visit the police properties in Wellingborough. Well, I say Wellingborough. It would be a good idea if this was reinstated, because of course we haven't seen it, and of course now you have the fire that is also in those premises. It will help the panel to actually see what improvement you have made so far.
Mrs. Shields, that's on the next item on our work programme, so we'll come to that in a minute.
Subject to COVID, we would like you to come and see it. We'd like more of our staff to be able to kind of come and see it, but not at the risk of putting anyone at risk, if that makes sense.
Can you just remind me where we are with the MFSS and LGSS and for the fire and the sort of merger and getting the systems together?
Here's how long have you got, Chair? Okay, so if I talk about policing first, so policing will be moving from the multi-force shared services collaboration arrangement that used to do, well, still currently do, finance, HR, duty planning, some inventory and some other bits. For Northamptonshire, Nottinghamshire and Cheshire, we will be moving away from that for police from the 1st of April. We have a new ERP Gold system and other associated systems that are being implemented. So that's all happening from the 1st of April. Cheshire and Nottinghamshire are also doing their own thing. I don't know if members will recall, but that's been quite a painful experience, and it's been quite expensive, and it's never really given us the service that we felt it should do. Okay, so we're looking forward to that. So policing are going live from the 1st of April. And in terms of fire, they're currently using LGSS services, as they have been ever since the governance transfer. In the governance business case, Stephen had set aside, I think, that we would do it for a year. They've been well looked after by LGSS on the services, but we are looking to bring them together with police, and they'll be joining on the 1st of April 2023. So the year after. We're not doing police and fire bang on the same system on the same day. We have a year between them, and we're phasing it in a planned and structured way.
And I just wanted to comment, because some people might not, because I just noticed some new panel members and they're kind of going, what the hell is MFSS? It's probably the biggest bane in my life, I imagine. It was something I inherited. It was called Multi-Force Shared Services. It was originally a collaboration between Northamptonshire and Cheshire that then Civil Nuclear and Nottinghamshire added. And it was about having essentially your core, your payroll, your finance all in one place, hosted in Cheshire, where it was cheaper to hire people. But it required people to self-service. It was very difficult if you tried to recruit people. It was dingy. I would go and meet new recruits, and their payroll or their tax code would be screwed up in their first month. You're inviting people to be the brightest and the best and look after the people in Northamptonshire, and you can't even pay them properly. But of course, it's not the sort of thing that you just flick a switch to turn off, because it's an original thing. So we've put a phased plan together, and you're just seeing the culmination of that. So actually, and also, what's that mean? It means it's easy for us to hire. It means our staff are happier, our suppliers are happier, and we actually believe it'll actually be cheaper for us and or more efficient. So, but at the end of the day, it would have cost more, and it would have been the right thing to do to support all of our staff. But also the combination of bringing them together means also then access to management information, all those sorts of things a lot easier. And these are also the consequence of actually having police and fire under one governance. Then actually you kind of start to get some of these efficiencies in terms of emergency services, and your buying power works.
Good. And I hope you've sort of got you know, a phase-in plan, because you can't just sort of switch from one
I
thing to
promise
another.
you, there's an astounding, it cost me an awful lot of money over the last couple of years to put those in there, but we've done what we can to mitigate it. Well, I'm confident you can, I'm not going to risk the world of saying that it's thing, but an awful lot of work has been gone, and we've tried to take over. We've tended to take bits out of MFSS earlier, which on one level meant that we've paid twice, but actually that's reduced the risk as a consequence of it.
I'm glad to hear it. Right, any other questions on the fire precept? Otherwise, can I have, Councillor Maxwell, did you want to make a proposal?
I was just going to just ask a question on page 99. I've got 4 minutes.
What's the question?
Well, the question is, if you look at the ICT budget, capital programme, I should say, it reduces in 25-26. How can you actually forecast that?
We have a detailed capital programme where we itemise every single item that needs to go in it, lines and lines and lines galore. On ICT, they haven't had investment in ICT for years. Everything is needing doing and doing soon, which is why it is quite front loaded within the capital programme. Within a few years, we then start to get more of a regular business as usual kind of programme. But this is that legacy area that we've been talking about. ICT has legacy issues, just as vehicles did, just as estates did. So it is front loaded in the programme.
It's one small nuance. A lot of ICT these days where you would tend to, and I'm not saying this is it, but back up what Mrs. King said there. But in addition to that, you're seeing more ICT in revenue rather than capital, because a lot of stuff is moving to the cloud in terms of software as a service. So actually you see it, sometimes that's great because it means there's less of an upfront cost, but it might mean the overall cost is more or the same, but actually on a positive, it probably is more resilient. And obviously the benefit of putting some of these things in the cloud is then makes it easier to kind of connect together. So if you put some of those.
On that estates, on that column, that chart as well, it also, the estates is much higher for the next year than subsequent years. So is that the purchase of the new fire appliances, or?
So the estates, that one's a good spot.
Sorry, not
that's
the fire
no, that's
appliances.
okay. The estates is two elements to it. Yes, there's a huge legacy side of things on estates, appropriate welfare facilities for firefighters. So they are for men and women, you know, much better facilities, asbestos removal and all sorts of things on the estates, legacy issues that need addressing. But it is also the workshop, the joint workshop. Now this is the interesting bit with the joint governance of the of the governance of police and fire. They are separate legal entities. So the building of the joint workshop has been purchased by fire, but it will charge police a rent element for it. Whereas Derby House was purchased by police and fire are paying a rent element for it. Okay, so that one will be fire's asset because they will be selling their current workshops and moving into there. Okay.
It'd be interesting, just a minute, Sheds, it'd be interesting to see if the government are sort of hearing that there's some legislation coming shortly to, you know, maybe suggest that other areas might to go into fire, whether they make it not so red and blue and make it purple.
I had a conversation with the Home Office exactly on that conversation just yesterday afternoon, because actually in the end there is, and it's probably worth saying it's, you know, take this before you say anything, essentially I'm schizophrenic. I'm a police authority and a fire authority. Whilst that power vests in one person, I have to actually, carry out those roles separately, but they're very interrelated. And so we've had a lot of conversations about how it's inappropriate and you're not helping transformation by doing some of those things. One of my ambitions has been to bring together police and fire control room in the same place. Most people dial 999, they naturally assume that all three services are sat not far from one another. No. Ambulance is not even in this county. I don't pass judgment on that, but actually with connectivity, that's kind of less of an issue. But I actually genuinely have an ambition. I don't want some of the terrible things that happen in Manchester to happen in Northamptonshire as a consequence of them not being in the same place. But of course, that means they're coming into a police building, and actually, so I'll have to have thingy over here and a rent over there and all that bit. But the bit I just wanted to kind of reiterate, the other parts of it outside of it are really, really important. And I've been very cognizant that we haven't had the resources or the, not just money, but people to kind of get to them in terms of shower, welfare facilities. Let's not underestimate, some of these people would sleep on station. There isn't sufficient dividing for male and female, that sufficient showers of a quality that you would want people to kind of get. We are getting there. There's a decent budget there to make sure it happens, and I look forward to us delivering on behalf of that. But I thank very much those firefighters across Northamptonshire for their patience as we've kind of got to their point. But we know that it's been painful, and we will come into that for them.
It also seems sensible to bring together the fact that you have to wait for the local government settlement for the fire, but the police settlement is separate. It's very disjointed, it seems, from an outside point of view. So, Mrs. Shields.
Just a quick question on the point that you've raised. Have we received the fire transformation grant yet?
Yes, we have. And we have approval to use it towards the workshops.
Is this going to be just a one-off, or are we going to have this every year?
It was just a one-off, and it was a one-off that fire had given to them by the Home Office for a different purpose, for something that they weren't intending to do. So we wrote to the Home Office and said, can we repurpose it towards the workshop, please? And gave them the business case rather than give you it back. And they said, yes, you can.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you. Much appreciated.
All right. So if we can perhaps move a bit closer, move on to the vote for the precept. Do you want to introduce this, James? Your legal bit.
It would be literally the same comments as I made for the police precepts,
then,
Chair.
Can I
The same
have a
options apply.
proposal, Councillor Pritchard?
I propose that we accept the proposals put forward by the. I accept that. I propose that we actually agree the proposals put forward by the Commissioner for his fire budget for next year.
Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Got him first. Okay, well, we have several seconders. All those in favour? Again, unanimous. Right, so we'll now go on to the work programme. Not a huge amount on this, so hopefully fairly quick. You'll see the paper there. Do you want to talk us through it, James?
Happy to, Chair. Yes, it's the standard reports and the state of the work programme in the appendix at the moment reflects what was agreed by the panel at its last meeting in December. So, as you've already mentioned, an item on fire safety risks in residential properties scheduled for the panel meeting on the 14th of April, and the identification of a possible topic for a possible topic for future scrutiny around children and young people's involvement in crime and antisocial behaviour. Couple of further potential additions mentioned at today's meeting. So the Commissioner made an offer to bring an item to a future panel meeting, or however best that would be done, on telematics, the telematics system, and the potential for the panel to carry out a visit to Derby House, which has been mentioned in the past, was also mentioned again.
Yeah.
So
that is mentioned in that paper as well, and that was going to be when we had the briefing with the two chiefs. Unfortunately, they had to be postponed. So I would say that is probably best to do that at the same time, rather than have a special trip just to look around the building. So hopefully you'll be able to sort out a date for us, Stephen. That would be really useful. There was something in the minutes but I think it was the children's, where I noted that there was something else to come forward. But I think it was probably the children's one, which you just mentioned that had been pushed forward. It's the involvement of children and young people in crime and antisocial behaviour as a potential topic for scrutiny, subject to further consideration of the practicalities involved. So I don't know what practicalities we might need to take into account there, but that's for a future one. We obviously won't need the 17th of February date. You can cross that off your diary, since we've agreed the precepts, so we don't need the extra one. And obviously the meeting 1, 2, 3 of page 136 are dates that we will decide in the next item. So are there any other items that members want to? Yes. Did you want to?
Can I just be cheeky, Madam Chairman, remind you that I did bring, we're not going to sign them for you, but the latest police fire and crime plan for all members to take away. I don't want anyone going home as you've been kind of, you can have your gift now. Approve the panel.
If everyone would like to see James before they leave, because he has them over here, and then I'm sure he'll arrange to get them sent out to anyone who is not here. Yes, that's very generous of you. Any other points that anyone wants to raise, to put on the forward plan? Councillor Maxwell.
Well, I thought you actually did say about multiple sort of.
Yes, that's on April. If you have a look on April,
All right.
on discretionary business,
Yeah.
that's in there. So that's already in the flat plan. And sometimes we put an item on saying we'd like to discuss this sometime, and we don't decide when, but that one was put as a date. And
secondly, trading standards, which I'm interested in from a police point of view. Is there a possibility of looking at trading standards and the role they take with the police on fighting crime?
I think I'll pass that to Stephen, but I would have thought personally that was a council scrutiny function.
You know I love you. You know that. I actually, and the reason I'm, there's two parts of this. One, it really is the purview of the councils. I actually did offer some years ago to take the funding and put them together, because I do believe it would genuinely be in the best interest of everyone to actually do that. Maybe Councillor Maxwell, my one suggestion, I don't know where they're hosted, but there obviously is that I would love to find space for them to be co-located. There is an awful lot of work together that is being done to do together in terms of test purchase and in terms of safety. If you like, we're going to have a chat in a second, and I will, on your behalf, I will, as part of my accountability, I will specifically ask the Chief Constable about the question: what could be done better to work in conjunction with trading standards? Would you like that?
That'd be good. Lastly,
You haven't got yours.
Lastly, would modern day slavery come into this?
Not really, I don't think well,
No, what we could do though is I did think one of the things we ought to do, and particularly because this new panel, there's probably some subject matters that I would off-piste, if you like, make for presentations that are available to you in terms of some of those. And if you know, that's up to you to tell me what they are. I would say modern day slavery, something around the fleet. There's a crying out loud. I could give you a briefing every week, but you want to pick the stuff that you want to have kind of greater insight to, really.
Quite often previously to you being on the panel, we did have, you know, at the beginning of you did one on voice and various other topics like that. So, you know, if there's a topic that's of interest, you know, they bring the subject experts and tell us about it prior to our normal discussions.
Yeah, so if the panel draws up a list of things you want through James and Stuart, we'll make available subject to a kind of it not affecting any operational performance, and we'll kind of get a briefing for you and an interactive one perhaps at the beginning of a panel or something.
Just like to bring up, however, that the modern day slavery, so the police actually are involved with licensing, and that's where quite a lot of modern day slavery actually occurs. And however, when it comes to court, it's not always seen through because the people who are doing it don't pay the fines. So, but I'm interested in, I would be interested in seeing how the police can actually work more effectively, I'd say, with licensing.
That might be a sort of joint thing. I don't know quite how that will work. Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair. I second Councillor Maxwell's interest in a discussion around modern day slavery. And I just also like to ask about the children and young people involved in antisocial behaviour. When will that materialise and what will that form into? Will that form into one of the suggestions made there? When I feel like that is quite a pressing issue that we would get a lot out of at this time. And I'd quite like to see that happen before we roll in too far into the summer, spring, with the potential of someone maybe taking my seat on this panel in the future. I'd like to get that covered before that opportunity's gone.
So what do you think about that young people one, James? Have you looked into that at all?
Well, I think that the way it was raised at the previous panel was akin to a piece of in-depth work by a local authority scrutiny committee. You know, members were talking about having information gathering sessions in inverted commas with young people, with the commissioners, with the commissioner, with potentially with others involved. As with all scrutiny work like that, I think the starting point that I would advise would be the panel being clear about what it was looking to do, what it was looking to achieve, and therefore the approach that it should take would follow from that. So was the panel looking at doing a piece of information gathering work that might lead to a report and recommendations to the commissioner about actions that might be taken to better address issues affecting Northamptonshire? There is scope for the panel to do that. It can be part of panels' roles generally. That kind of task and finish scrutiny work is not something that that this panel has done in the past, and there would be resource implications that would need to be considered in working out what was done, how it was done, and when it was done. So I'd always counsel the panel, just as I would any other scrutiny committee, to be clear at the starting point about what it was looking to do, and then the how it was looking to do it, and the timescale for that would follow after.
Yeah.
Can I come back then and say, can we make a decision on that now? Everything has to start somewhere, and I feel like there's a lot of talk going on and not a lot of pushing things forward. So can we make a decision now on what that could potentially look like when it will start. I mean, a really good place to start is a presentation from the people that do it and that know it. That's an excellent place to start for us to gather real data information and then have a discussion on whether we think it's even worth putting a task and finish group together, because you don't know until you've got the information to support your evidence. So can I potentially politely push for that to happen?
So are you thinking, unfortunately Nikki's not here at the moment, but you know, something like the ACE work and the work the youth intervention, early intervention team do, would that be possible, Stephen? Perhaps a presentation by that team or people from that working with them, and then at that point, maybe if we felt the task and finish was necessary, but as James said, you've got to know what you want to get out of it. There's no point in just doing it for the sake of it.
And just supporting James, I do remind you, you're here to hold me to account, to hold the force to account.
Yeah.
This is not a police authority. I'm not trying to be pedantic. I'm the police authority.
Yeah.
No, and sometimes that kind of gets lost. So actually, it's your opportunity to influence me, to influence the force, if that makes sense.
But I think you.
No, I'm not trying to say we're not. I've just said yes, that we'll come and do the. You're absolutely right in terms of the presentation, but look, I don't think any of you can accuse me of not being open in I'm working in conjunction with you. But I'm just mindful in terms of roles. And to be honest, we all got a good relationship. There might be someone in here who that isn't going to be the case in the future. So we just have to be careful in our legislative boundaries.
I think because
when someone takes over from you, Councillor McGee, I'd be sorry to see you go. I hope that's not the case, but cool.
Sorry, you know, as you set up that team, obviously it's, you know, very important.
Well, that one in particular is a team that I created that works for me. So it's quite right for you to ask questions around that. Right. So, you know, the rather than, if you like, what the force, and you're quite rightly in that, will tease out in terms of one of the things that we're working out. And like I say, Nikki's not here right now, but in terms of some of the stuff that we're trying to get better working with policing, better working with local authorities. I'm very keen to have the conversation because I'm not just concerned, I'm extremely concerned about the ability of that team to work with the Children's Trust. I'm not going to go further than that today, but I'm just going to say data sharing and vulnerability is a real concern for me.
So if we can just think of timescales, because, hang on a second,
chip in here. I understand actually what you're I think what we're looking at is the way you actually work as a police commissioner in tackling things like this, where this 15-year-old has just got 15 years in prison. What we're looking at is your role actually making sure that what you're overseeing with the police is actually physically happening. You know, is whatever you do, the funding that you have and the funding that you actually oversee to make sure the police are accountable for what they actually do with young people. What we want to know, or at least I think I'd like to know, how in the future, how are we going to, for instance, make sure that the next generation, so I'm sort of looking at years 5 and 6, are actually going to be encouraged not to follow a path of a teenager who goes out with a knife and then ends up killing somebody. And it's not just a one-off. These things are happening. It doesn't matter where you are. You only need to go and look at children. Yesterday, children coming out of school. So getting 2 fingers up yesterday is something that, you know, does concern me. But I'd like to see, like I talked to your 3 police people in Abington Park yesterday, what I would like to see, I'd like to see a better relationship that you're creating between young people and the police. I think that is what we want to know what your role is.
I think that's more sort of Stephen, holding the force to account for how they do it. But I think a start is certainly the ACE team and the early intervention, and then it can sort of lead on to other questions. But I was just going to say about when we could do that, because obviously we only have one really substantive meeting in April, which has already got the fire safety one on. Would it be too much to have that as well?
Why didn't you ask us? And like I said, we'll have this. Nick is in recruitment, so that we'll see what we can put together.
Well,
But the other one, I would just, I'm not trying to avoid it, but the important part of it, you mentioned ASB.
Well,
It's a combination of some of those where it's not just one organisation's.
Well, I just wonder if it won't fit on the timetable, is whether we have a separate briefing. That's what I was thinking.
I think as you have indicated, Jim, is a separate briefing.
Yeah, James.
I was going to say, Chair, it's about priorities and you've already got the item for the 14th of April meeting about home fire safety risks in residential property. But if the panel thinks that an item on the children and young people issue is more important than that, then that can be slotted in, and the item on home fire safety can be rescheduled.
Yeah, exactly.
Or indeed, you could ask to do both of them, but dare I suggest it, not have either or both of the delivery updates or the budget updates.
Okay.
It's the panel's agenda to set. Just because something's already on the list doesn't mean it can't be rescheduled to reflect something that the panel thinks is a higher priority.
Okay.
Or you could do a briefing session, as has been suggested.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I think the CSPs are going to be covering off a lot of this already, to be honest. I mean, I think the briefing would be interesting, but the CSP, it's multi-agency. It's a huge meeting. I do think we might be covering the areas which are, it's already being covered in all honesty. So I think in certain areas, yes, it will be good for a briefing, but yeah, there's a lot already covered, I think. And
I think the problem might be the West CSP might be in a better, I'm not.
You may well think that, but you couldn't possibly comment.
Well, the thing is that I think
it has a slight lead, may I put it that way? Is that my impression?
Well, I think that the thing is that the CSP might well be, but that doesn't get back to anybody else.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. We never find out about it.
I'd just like to clarify that this is a place of learning for everybody. We're feeding back things that we think is important, not just from our wards. And I don't particularly also think advocating for targeted neighbourhood policing is lobbying for my own ward. But what I do think is that these matters are important. I personally, as well as all of us, have been given an opportunity to explore them for the greater good of this county. Why would we not do that? That's that.
So we've got two choices really. Either we put it on the 14th, move the fire one, keep both of them on there, or have a separate session. What we've got, Stephen?
May I propose that you put children, the ACE and the youth on there? To be honest, we could do a very shortened year-end budgetary bit. We've just essentially set in the one to it in terms of priorities. Well, you're talking about a budget that's only just started for the coming year. It would seem sense to kind of have that. I don't know what availability is like for that team because we're actually practitioners, but we'll do what we can to endeavour to sort it out.
So basically, the budget, as James said, make that a very sort of quick just headlines. Yeah, that's possible. Yeah.
I was thinking about what Councillor Zoe was saying. Everybody is concerned about ASB and the other issue. The problem is that this is a big item, and we have got to be very clear of the objective that we want to achieve. So I think if we have a meeting, an initial meeting on that day on the 14th to establish from what you proposed to come, then we'll be much clearer then about what we have got to do and just take it. from there.
And there is some, people, James is very right about clarity. If you ask me to come and tell you about ASB, the youth and the ACEs is a slightly different proposition to ASB. It's adverse childhood experiences. There's a clue in the title of the name, if you like. So being specific about what it is you want to, I know they're all interrelated and we can phase them together. Maybe you want ACE and youth team on one and a broader one on kind of ASB. But in truthfulness, ASB, I can get you to what policing is, but it's actually, and it is a challenge for us. How do we talk about what's being joined up? Because that quite rightly is predominantly under ASB, and an awful lot of antisocial behaviour is actually, the obligations are actually under the local authority as much as they are in terms of policing, which is why the CSP is I feel like I'm trying to be the peacemaker with the sides there.
Okay, so we're suggesting then that we have the item on the ACE and the youth intervention and the HMO one as well, but make the budget one a bit shorter so that that can accommodate it, so it's not too overloaded. Okay. Okay.
Excuse me, Chair. I think something that we also have to look very, very closely at is what is the terms and reference of this particular committee? Because otherwise, we'd be getting into areas where where the commissioner doesn't have total responsibility for. So I would hate to see this particular committee go into tangents where in fact we don't get the benefits of actually holding the commissioner to task.
Yeah, I think, the commissioner said all through all of his reports, I think that it's all down to partnership working and he can't do everything neither can the police or the fire. and everyone does have to work together. It's just you've got to start somewhere, I think. And if we start with information here, and then that may lead on to us taking it back to our councils and doing things elsewhere.
I really would welcome around in terms of ACE youth and stuff like that, because actually I think there will be some bits you'll take away from it, Councillor McGee's, sorry, actually, so Councillor McGee, that you actually go away and actually there's some questions genuinely I would want you to ask in your council, because actually one ambition we should all share, how do we all make sure early help is universal? How do we make sure there's integrated in terms of services? And I'm telling you right now, it's veering apart. At the moment, as I sat in my office yesterday, I wish the county council could
Oh dear, oh dear. Including the fire service going back to?
Could I just say one thing? I understand where you're coming from, but I would like to say what we actually, I think you've actually not quite understood what we're actually saying.
I've been on this committee for some period of time, so I'm not a newcomer to it.
I didn't say that, actually. I'm not saying that at all.
Okay.
I'm just saying we want to hold Mr. Muld to accountability in relation to what's happening now. We're new onto this as well. You're not new, but we are. And where we see it from is when we see things like this popping up this week in the wards that we actually look after, we want to make sure that the police and the crime commissioner is actually making sure it's actually happening, that we are stopping this and we are looking after the very people that we've been elected to do.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, Madam Chairman, I'm just picking up on your last point, and I think that this is where one has to be careful. And I think Councillor McGee was slightly offended by what I meant there, but I didn't mean it that way. What it is we are all here on a collective on the strategic direction of the force. Now, quite rightly, we need to raise questions about what's going on if something's not working in particular areas, is the point I'm trying to say. But actually, it's not for me to say this, but you don't sit here as councillors. You are the police, fire and crime panel, and you're holding me to account.
That's right.
The fact that your councillor is a secondary, and in fairness, it's going to give you access to me in a way that you're not. Please use it, but let's do that outside of it, not in the
Yeah.
panel.
Okay, fine.
Councillor McGee, did you want to?
I
finish up?
just like hasten to add, I agree with what Councillor Maxwell was saying, and I thank you for what you're saying, because all I'm trying to do here is use this opportunity that we've all got to scrutinise Stephen, to bring our head above reports, bring our head above words and mountains and paper, and bring it into the reality of what's actually going on, the people that are actually there and the people that are actually doing it. Because I don't have a hell of a lot of experience, but the experience that I've got has taught me that if you go out, do that, see that, you can hold the people with the power to account much better than you can being bogged down in papers and reports. That's what this is about.
Okay, well, I think when they come and do a presentation, I think it always comes much more to life from ones I've seen before. You know, it's you've got much, yeah, I'm sure, yeah. Okay. Yes.
Just quickly, Chair, touching on a point that was made earlier, do panel members want to send to me any ideas that they have for briefing topics that you would like to receive? And does the panel want to include something on telematics in that?
Would everyone like to just sort of contact James and make suggestions of other things they'd like to have a briefing on?
I can consolidate that and then bring it back to
Yeah.
an appropriate future meeting, and then that gives you something of a programme to work through.
The future. Okay, Councillor Carl.
I think obviously within that, with the officer's guidance, I think it covers both the points that Councillor McGee and Councillor Maxwell and Councillor Pritchard have said. It's about the terms of reference of this committee, or this panel, I should say, in regards to what it can and can't quiz the commissioner over. I'm sorry to say, I can think of 101 questions I'd like to ask him, but it's not in this panel that I would be doing those kind of questions, I hasten to add.
Yeah, there are other forums. Yeah. Well, also there are the other forums that you run and things like that. They're sometimes, probably more appropriate for some questions. Okay.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, this item is within your plan, isn't it? So it is something that we need to scrutinize you. Exactly. And the more we know, the better then you will be. And so if this meeting is going to clarify some issues that we have got to consider, then we will know at that meeting. And if it means that after that meeting, well, we have got limitation, as the other councillor just mentioned, because you have some barrier into some partnership, then we need to know. So like that, we can address the direction of travel.
Okay,
That's what
so I think we've covered that. So just the final item are the meeting dates for 2022-23. You've got them there at 3.1. Are there any that people think are a problem, or may I
ask a question?
Yeah.
Chair, I'm assuming then we'll all be back on the panel next year. We don't know that for sure,
That
do
is
we?
down to our respective leaders.
Yeah, it could be, we could say, oh yeah, we're all available for that. And yet none of it might be the point that none of us end up serving on this panel again next year.
That is quite possible, but it normally works from the point of view that the existing panel sets up dates. Occasionally we change them because something's cropped up and Stephen wasn't able to make.
And if that's the case, I won't be at the next two panel meetings. One of us at a family wedding, and then the other one I'm on a holiday.
Which one's that? The
23rd and on the 8th, but it's not based around me, of course, and I don't know whether, of course, I'll be here next year. It might be my last panel meeting ever, but I hope it's not.
Right. Okay. Obviously, there are always, personal commitments to come in, and that's where we said about the sort of getting substitutes, which I'm still working on for the North, we haven't always got it right for the West either. So I think we might need to look into that a bit more. But
some fixed point. Taking the point that meeting dates can be changeable and membership can be changeable. If nothing is fixed, then you're trying to, it makes it more difficult to fit something to something. So yeah, if the panel were happy with those dates as something to work towards, that would be very useful.
Okay, so no urgent business that's been expressed and there's nothing we need to exclude the public and press for. So I will call this meeting to end, and we only 4 minutes over James's schedule. So actually,
Well done, James, for the schedule. I think that was the best innovations.